This is about Lindsay Clancy. She had some mental health struggles and was on a lot of different medications. And it's one of those cases where you're torn because you want to feel for her mental illness, but you can't excuse what she did. And the fact that it was so planned out makes it even harder to get past and to be able to feel empathy for her. But I do feel empathy for her because there's no way that she can't be completely ripped apart on the inside from the loss of her children, and especially knowing that she probably had a mental break and she was clearly struggling and reaching out for help and trying to do the right thing and get the help she needed, but it didn't work. And unfortunately, there was 3 innocent lives lost brutally because her mental health was not where it should have been. And that's a very serious issue that I think should be discussed more openly, more frequently. And I think that if somebody's having a struggle, this is a place where you should definitely feel safe, because as time goes on, you'll hear me talk more about my past and my struggles. Never be ashamed if you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis. You can always dial 988 or text home to 741-741. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so trigger warning. Like I said, this discusses unaliving, and this also discusses of children by their mother. So, trigger warning, okay? All right. Now, this is the Lindsay Clancy arraignment prosecution defense make cases in killing of 3 Duxbury children by CBS Boston.
Commonwealth, I'll hear from you first.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Commonwealth is requesting that the defendant be held without bail based on the facts of the case, the strength of the Commonwealth's case, and the potential penalty.
Does anybody know who that man is there, right here?
On Friday, January 27th, 2023, using an erasable whiteboard because she was still temporarily intubated, one of the first questions that Lindsay Clancy asked was, "Do I need an attorney?"
So I think she can talk now, but she couldn't when she was very first in the hospital.
She knew that she had murdered her children, and she had the clarity, focus, and mental acumen to focus on protecting her own rights and interests. The following is a summary of the events that led to the murders of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and Callan Clancy. On the morning of Tuesday, January 24th, 2023.
So she wasn't out of her mind. She might have had a mental break. Obviously, she did. That's not something you do unless you just did have a mental break. But she wasn't out of her mind. She was still in a state where she was sane and she knew what she was doing, because that's proven because of her order that she placed for her food and the fact that she was texting with her husband back and forth, and everyone said she was clear-minded that day, and that she was actually having one of her best days, which concerns me because sometimes when people are bipolar and you think they're having one of their best days, they're actually getting into a manic state, and that could have been what was happening with her. I don't know. I don't think I've heard what her mental diagnosis is. I don't know if she was bipolar or what she had going on. I know she had postpartum anxiety, and she was deemed not to have postpartum depression by a facility that she was in.
The defendant took her 5-year-old daughter, Cora, to the pediatrician's for an appointment. She interacted with a receptionist, nursing staff, and a doctor. There were apparently no issues with the defendant's demeanor or behavior, as she completed the appointment and was allowed to leave with Cora without any issues or concerns. When she returned home, she went outside with Cora and her 3-year-old son, Dawson, to play in the snow. They built a snowman. The defendant sent photos to her mother and to the defendant, to her husband. She texted with them. Nothing in the text was out of the order.
See, so the things that she's saying basically is she knew what she was doing. She knew what was going on. And that's basically what she talks about for the next few minutes. She knows what she was doing. She was all there. She was with it. She was talking to her husband. She was talking to her mother. She was playing with her kids outside. They were sending pictures, taking pictures, she was just doing normal mom things with her kids.
Name for pickup, Patrick.
She gave the correct name for pickup, Patrick, her husband's name, when she called to order the food for takeout to get picked up.
The hostess who took the call said there was nothing out of the ordinary about this call. She was able to understand the defendant, that her voice was not slurred or impaired in any way.
So her voice wasn't slurred or impaired in any way, so it's not like she was on something. And if she was, not enough to where it was affecting her speech, at least.
At 5:15 p.m., Patrick Clancy headed out the door to run these errands at the defendant's request. As he left, she texted him Pedialex liquid stool softener. Surveillance footage shows Mr. Clancy at CVS on Summer Street in Kingston at 5:32 p.m. He goes to the medication aisle, the children's medication aisle. Phone records show that he called the defendant at 5:33 p.m. and she did not answer the phone. She then calls him back at 5:34 p.m. and the call lasted 14 seconds.
You truly never know what's happening behind closed doors.
There at the store, unsure of which medication to get, and she tells him exactly what she wants.
Can you imagine you're just at the store getting normal things for your children? You would never think, my children are in danger. My children aren't safe right now. I need to hurry up and get back. Like, you would think your children would be completely safe. Like, imagine how off guard, talk about being caught off guard, like walking into that house and just hearing complete silence. Like, that's just devastating.
She wants. He had no issues communicating with her. It was a completely normal call, although he did mention that she seemed like she was in the middle of something. He is on surveillance footage during this time, exiting that aisle and appeared to be using his phone. He then heads to the register, makes his purchase, and leaves the store.
So,
when he arrives home, the first thing he noticed was the silence.
Yep, like I was saying.
He did not see or hear the defendant or the children.
Just imagine walking into your home where there's normally a infant that is 7 months old making jabbering and talking and crying or whatever, and making some kind of noise, along with your toddler and your 5-year-old child who are probably playing or arguing or, running around the house or doing something to where they're making noise. And then you've got the mother who's probably hollering for one of the kids or asking a question or doing her own thing or cleaning or who knows what. You know what I'm saying? So there's going to be all this noise when you walk into your house, and he walks in and it's just complete silence.
actually called her cell phone at 6:09 p.m. looking for them, and she did not answer. He went to their bedroom on the second floor and the door was locked. He was able to open it, and when he looked inside, he saw blood on the floor in front of a full-length mirror and the window open. He immediately ran.
Can you imagine? You're thinking immediately, you hear silence when you walk in, and then you see blood. Like, imagine the sheer terror you would feel.
He runs downstairs and into the backyard, where he finds the defendant laying on the ground. She appeared to have cuts on her wrists and neck, but he stated
So she cut herself first and then jumped out the window.
to 911 that those wounds were no longer bleeding. She was conscious. He called 911. During this time, he asked the defendant, "What did you do?" She responded to him, "I tried to kill myself and jumped out the window." During the 911 call, Patrick can be heard asking the defendant, "Where are the kids?" He later told police that she...
My God, can you imagine not knowing if your kids are okay in that time and then finding out they're not? That's like literally the most terrible thing that could happen to somebody.
replied, "In the basement." So immediately after this happened, she knew what she had done and she knew where the kids were. When EMS arrived, he asked them to stay with her so he could go find his kids. The 911 call kept going.
I almost don't want to hear the 911 call, but I do because I want to hear what Lindsay sounds like. Like, does she just sound cold and heartless? Does she sound panicked?
Can be heard on the 911 call entering the home and heading to the basement. At one point, he calls out, "Guys." He can then be heard screaming in agony and shock as he found his children. His
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't want to hear that.
screams seem to get louder and more agonized as the time passes. Cora and Callan were on the floor in the den area of the finished basement, which is to the left when you walk down the stairs, while Dawson was alone on the floor in his father's home office, which is to the right when you go down the stairs. Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks when their father found them.
Oh my goodness. That is so awful and something that he's probably never going to recover from. And I wish there was more that could be done to help somebody in a situation like that. But unfortunately, that's just a pain that probably cuts so deep that there's nothing you can do to heal it. And that's so unfortunate and sad.
Dawson and Callan were face down on the floor. Cora was on her side with her torso turned towards the floor. He removed the bands and begged them to breathe. He continued to scream uncontrollably and scream for officers to come to the basement.
I can't even imagine having to beg my child to breathe knowing that they weren't going to.
The dispatchers are hearing this and they send help down to the basement. And when they encounter Patrick, he yells out, "She killed the kids." The police rushed the children to ambulances that brought them to the hospital.
That would probably be so hard to even say.
And unfortunately, Cora and Dawson were declared dead at the hospital. Callan was med-flighted to Boston Children's Hospital.
I wonder what the police thought when they got there. I wonder if they, it was just so obvious what happened. Or I wonder if they thought, he could be possibly a suspect at first. You know what I'm saying? I wonder how, when they very first got there, what the police were thinking.
Hospital medical staff was able to restart his pulse.
It was I feel like it was probably pretty obvious. You know what I mean? Just because of how the dad was acting and the fact that the mom was out back and he just told him right away she killed the kids. And it would be obvious that she tried to kill herself, especially the fact that she cut herself too. She cut her wrists and her neck.
But not his brain activity. He was placed on life.
So they could restore his pulse, but not his brain activity, the 7-month-old. So after 3 days, he was pronounced dead.
For several days before passing away. The defendant was transported to South Shore Hospital and then to a Boston area hospital where she remains. She sustained several broken bones in her back and her rib cage.
So she just got several broken bones in her back and her rib cage, but she's paralyzed.
The police were able to find several notebooks in the defendant's home pursuant to a search warrant, and also notes on her phone that was similar to journal entries. In the months, weeks, and days preceding January 24th, 2023, the defendant meticulously detailed her daily activities, her children's lives, her mental state, and her medication use.
I wonder if she was misdiagnosed with postpartum anxiety, but really she was in a state of manic depression.
Writing was clear, precise, and articulate. She never indicated that she was hallucinating, delusional, or had disordered thoughts or speech. In all of her writing, she appears to know who she is.
Granted, you don't have to be hallucinating to unalive your children, because we've seen it happen so many times. Just not typically does it turn out like this.
Where she is, the date, and with whom she's interacted. She wrote a note on her phone the day before killing the children, stating that she had, quote, a touch of postpartum anxiety, end quote, around returning to work. She wrote that
I would say that's more than a touch. And she should know that, being a labor and delivery nurse.
Psychiatrist had prescribed medication to help her. The defendant was initially diagnosed, according to her husband, with generalized anxiety disorder. She was then evaluated at the Women and Infant Center for Women's Behavioral Health in Providence, Rhode Island on December 20th, 2022. There, after an evaluation, she was told in the presence of her husband that, by psychiatrists, that she did not have postpartum depression and that she had no symptoms of postpartum depression.
So just because she didn't have postpartum depression doesn't mean that she couldn't have had some other serious mental health issues going on that were postpartum, and that could have been already going on before, and that symptoms were aggravated by the fact that she was postpartum, and it could have possibly been too much and she just could have snapped, and it was one of those types of snaps that are prolonged, and it lasted over the period of days, which I would consider manic. And I think that she could have been misdiagnosed, and maybe she's bipolar.
She wrote in her journal that at times she had suicidal ideation in December of 2022, and she also told her husband that she had suicidal thoughts and on one occasion had thoughts of harming her children. But she did not write or voice those thoughts after a stay at McLean Hospital. When she had those thoughts, she consulted with a psychiatrist and with her husband, and then she committed herself to McLean Hospital on January 1st, 2023. She was discharged by the hospital on January 5th, 2023.
Only 4 days after making such a claim. You'd think you'd be in there for like more than 4 days. 4 days isn't even long enough to get comfortable in a place like that.
And the hospital did not file any paperwork at that time attempting to have her committed as a danger to herself or others. She also kept meticulous and detailed daily medication logs and a diary that she wrote. She detailed that she had difficulties with each of the medications that were prescribed to her. And when she had issues with those medications, she detailed how her doctor either stopped that medication or wean off of it. And then tried.
It seems like her medications took over her life.
Something else. They were trying different medications to see what would work for her, what would benefit her. According to her husband, she was never on more than 4 to 5 medications at one time. And at the time of the murder, she was taking only 3 medications. And he said to the police that she always took the medications as prescribed. After her stay at McLean, the defendant appeared to be getting better, according to her husband. She slept well, interacted with friends and family. She went out with her kids and husband to places like the Kingsbury Club and Duxbury.
She was probably hopeful. That probably gave her a boost in her confidence when she was at that place, I'm sure. And she was just feeling extra confident, and maybe it helped her get her thoughts a little bit more organized, so she had a little bit more clarity of mind. But then she wasn't there long enough for it to set in. Just like they say SSRI medications take a couple weeks to kick in. Well, a treatment place like that's going to take a couple weeks to kick in, not 4 days.
Duxbury, the Charlie Horse Restaurant, the Museum of Science in Boston, the Cape Codder down the Cape, interacting with her family and the public without any apparent difficulties. She even stayed alone with the children on several occasions without any issues in January 2023. Her husband asked her in mid-January, "Are you still having suicidal thoughts?" And she said no. The defendant's parents visited the family the weekend of January 21st, 2023. They interacted with the defendant in person. The defendant was able to run errands while her mom watched the children. She texted back and forth with her mother, and there was nothing out of the ordinary about these text messages. In fact, the defendant texted her mother on January 22nd, 2023 to ask how her ride home went.
So I'm wondering if she was having, like, in her secret life, a lot more struggles than what she was letting out to people, just like in her regular personal life. Because that happens a lot to people. They struggle secretly because they're going through things that people know they're going through, but people don't realize how bad it's affecting them. And sometimes they don't even tell their own husbands, and they just shut down, and then it becomes too much for a person, and um, they begin having irrational thoughts, and they can't handle it anymore. And things like this unfortunately happen in extreme circumstances.
During this conversation, the defendant's mother wrote, quote, "Enjoyed seeing everyone this weekend. Nice to see you doing better," end quote. On the night of the killings, Patrick Clancy was interviewed by the police at Beth Israel Deaconess Clinic Hospital. He told the police that the defendant was having one of her best days. She was smiling and happy, and there was no indication that she was going to harm the kids. No one at all described her as acting like a zombie in the days leading up to the murder.
Although her husband said that her medications made her a zombie.
Or on the day of the murders themselves. On February 5th, 2023, this past Sunday at 1:35 p.m., while sitting with Dr. Paul Zeisel, the psychologist hired by defense counsel to evaluate her mental state, the defendant used Dr. Zeisel's cell phone to call her husband. She left a voicemail stating that she loved him. Yesterday, on February 6, 2023, at 10:09 a.m., she again used Dr. Zeisel's cell phone to call her husband. This time he answered, and during this call, the defendant stated that after he left the house that night, she killed the kids because she heard a voice and had, quote, "a moment of psychosis," end quote.
So she had a moment of psychosis, and you think that's not possible? That kind of bothers me, because a moment of psychosis is possible. I know that's possible.
He asked her what voices she heard, and she said she heard of me.
And yes, I know she went through these steps to see how long it would take, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean that she was planning on killing her children. It could have meant that she was planning on doing that to herself. And maybe at the last second, she did have a moment of psychosis, and the voice told her just to take them out too.
Voice telling her to kill the kids and kill herself because it was her last chance. Patrick Clancy told the police the defendant had never heard voices before. He also told the police the defendant had never used the word psychosis to him before. The first time she used that word psychosis was when she was with the doctor hired by defense counsel and using his cell phone. The defendant actually wrote a note on her phone on October 25th, approximately 3 months before this happened.
So what they're saying is she's never used that word before, and her husband's never heard her use that word before, so that couldn't have been what it was, right? I'm not saying what she did. I'm not defending this woman, but what I'm saying is, was it psychosis? Because that's a big deal. Or did she just want her children to die, and then she didn't want to live with it, so she killed herself? Or was she going to kill herself, and she decided that she wanted her children to go too? That's two completely different things, and that's a big difference to me.
October 25th, 2022. She wrote, quote, "I think I sort of resent my other children because they prevent me from treating Cal like my first baby. And I know that's not fair to them. I know that. I was feeling so depressed last evening when Cora and Dawson came home from school. I know it runs off on them, so we had a pretty rough evening. I want to feel love and connection with all of my kids." She then wrote that she wants to have more kids eventually. The children were killed by ligature strangulation. Ligature strangulation causes the victim to become unconscious anywhere from
Trigger warning, this is very graphic.
10 seconds up to a minute. The more the victim struggles, the longer it takes. After the victim is unconscious, the ligature must be held in place with force, squeezing the neck for up to an additional 4 to 5 minutes to cause death.
So she knew what she was trying to do when she was doing this.
Therefore, she had to strangle each of them to unconsciousness, and then make sure the bands were squeezing their little necks for several minutes. She could have changed her mind at any point during that time and removed those bands from their necks, and she did not. The defendant did not take advantage of the situation when her husband left the home that night. She created the situation, and she used Apple Maps to make sure she would have enough time to strangle each child before her husband returned from where she had sent him. The defendant is a danger to herself and others. She planned these murders, gave herself the time and privacy needed to commit the murders,
I don't see her as being a danger to others, honestly. I know it kind of sounds crazy to say that because she just killed 3 people, being her own children, and then tried to unalive herself, but I just think that she is a danger to herself, honestly.
And then she strangled each child in the place where they should have felt the safest, at home with their mom. She did so with deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity and cruelty. And to supplement what the defense counsel has provided, I have a statement of her. And thank you, Honor.
I'm not sure what she just handed him. It was some kind of statement.
Thank you very much. You're ready.
So now the defense is going to make their case in the killing of the 3 Duxbury children, right?
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Your Honor, my request is that the court not enter what I would suggest is an inhumane order, ordering this woman to be incarcerated. We all know, as people that work in the system, that jails and prisons are woefully deficient in medical care of the most basic type. We all know that this is an individual, as Your Honor knows from Dr. Ricard's letter, who is in dire medical condition. We all know that this woman is, as counsel concedes apparently, a danger to herself. I question whether she would ever make it to a trial. She's suicidal.
So he questions whether she would even make it to a trial because she wants to unalive herself. Well, I think she's going to make it to a trial because she's got people there with her and that are making sure she doesn't do that. So I don't really see where he's going with that.
She's extremely emotional. However, she's unable and has been unable to express any happiness or sadness or crying. And in fact,
I wonder why that is. Is it having to do with her being paralyzed, or is she just not experiencing emotions right now because her mental state?
sometime about a month or 2 ago, I just wish.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Now, our society fails miserably in treating women with postpartum depression or even postpartum psychosis. It's met.
I don't know about fails miserably. I got pretty good help, so I can't. Maybe I'm just biased because I got a good doctor.
Medicate. Throw the pills at you.
But that is true, though. I know a lot of people are on so much stuff that it's like, how do you function being on all those medications? Like, isn't that bad for your organs?
And then see how it works. If it doesn't work, increase the dose or decrease the dose. And then
I have to go get blood work done on Monday because of my medications. You know, that's my doctor's like very on it.
start trying another combination of medications. We're talking a relatively short period of time from when that baby was born in October up until January when this incident occurred, Your Honor, that she was on such significant dosage of medication. Your Honor knows that Cora was born in 2017. It was a very uneventful, normal pregnancy.
Very uneventful but normal pregnancy. Must be nice. My pregnancies were not uneventful or really what you would consider normal, probably.
And to look. No issues afterwards as far as anxiety. Dawson was born in 2018. Again, it was a normal birth. She had no significant.
Dawson was born in 2018. I thought Cora was born in 2018.
Issues as far as anxiety. She did have to have stitches and she was sore, and that was about it. Then, of course, Callan was born. When Callan was born, she ended up becoming depressed and suffered from significant anxiety, as a result of which she consulted with a number of doctors. A number of doctors indicated that she would be able to sleep, she would be able to feel, she would be able to emote once these medications kicked in.
So they were claiming that she would be able to do all these things that apparently she couldn't do.
And again, as I said, our medical and our society completely abandons women with this condition. It's easy to say, come on, you have a healthy baby.
I wish he would give a better example, or any example besides her.
You have a wonderful husband. You're able to take care of your kids in your home. You're lucky. Take the pills, you'll be okay. Well, they put her on a number of medications. They put her on Prozac, which Your Honor is well aware is known as SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Your Honor knows that along with some of these medications, they have the black box warning from the FDA.
Yeah, Prozac does have a black box warning, and I've heard a lot of people having a hard time on Prozac, actually.
They cause suicidal ideation. They cause homicidal ideation. She was on Ativan. She was on Benadryl. And then she ended
Prozac and Ativan probably shouldn't be combined. I don't know if I'm right or wrong about that.
up being told, okay, because she was complaining about the effects of the Prozac, they said, stop the Prozac. We'll find something else. They put her on Remeron.
How do you go from Prozac to Remeron?
Then they added on Seroquel. And Your Honor, I attached.
And I don't think Remeron and Seroquel should be safe to be on together if you're on Ativan.
David Benjamin, the toxicologist, some papers with the submission. And Your Honor can see the side effects that this Seroquel causes. She was having bad thoughts. She was having worsening depression. Her husband suffered through that phase. Her parents were well aware of the fact that she was suffering from this depression and depressive phase. She wasn't sleeping.
She wasn't sleeping, but she was on all these medications that would make a normal person sleep for days.
She ended up, at some point, Your Honor, December 31st, she was on Seroquel. They told her then the Valium would be stopped. She was to show herself. Nope.
So she was on Valium, too. That's a lot of sedative medications.
Personality, and went to the doctor again. The doctor again prescribes the Seroquel, and then they took her off the Seroquel. And then she went to the doctor, and at that point, they prescribed Trazodone.
Oh my goodness. Trazodone, I was on Trazodone before, and I used to have terrible nightmares and sleep paralysis when I took Trazodone.
Ativan.
And Ativan and amitriptyline. Guys, these are all sedative medications that are typically strong enough to knock a normal person out.
Triptyline. Right up to the very end.
These are actually all medications that I've been prescribed.
That she voluntarily turned herself in, if you will, to the McLean Hospital. We know that that's a psychiatric hospital.
I can't empathize with her on the wanting to hurt your kids thing, though. I've never had thoughts like that. I've had thoughts of maybe wanting to hurt other people at times, but never my children or anyone else's children. That I just can't wrap my mind around.
At the McLean Hospital for a period of about 5
It's so unnatural.
days. Well, at the McLean Hospital, they basically tried to get her off the Seroquel. She wanted to get off the benzodiazepines.
Now, getting off benzos, that's hard. You can have seizures and actually die from getting off benzos.
She felt that she was being addicted to the benzodiazepines.
You're definitely addicted to benzos if you've been prescribed them for a while.
She then ends up on Trazodone, Ativan. Her mood was terrible after she got out of the McLean Hospital. She still had the suicidal thoughts. As the government has indicated, she even told her husband that she had suicidal thoughts. You think this is something that she's planning to kill these 3 kids by going and getting a menu, going on to Google Maps or whatever it is, and finding out the distance? When she tells her husband she's having suicidal thoughts, wow, a month prior.
Yeah, so maybe she was just planning on getting off, taking her own life, and at the last minute she decided she wanted to take her children with her.
Thoughts of hurting the children? They go to the doctor again, and she's on the medications, on and off, on and on. This is a significant issue between the postpartum depression as well as
He's right, though. That is a significant issue.
possibility of postpartum psychosis that is pretty much ignored. But nevertheless, with the overlay of the SSRIs and the history, and Your Honor has some emails and things that people would reach out to me from all over the world, indicating that their daughter had the same problem, that they had the same problem. Your Honor is well aware that many.
So I guess he gives that example a little bit. It's kind of an example, I guess he's not going to stand there and name like a specific case, but it'd be cool if he did, because that'd be great to hear another example.
When people are on Prozac or on SSRIs, workplace violence, homicides, family homicides. This is clearly a tragic, which is a word that's used too much in the criminal justice system, but this really is a tragedy in this case. So we have, obviously,
Clearly, this is a tragedy.
I would suggest, a very good defense for this young woman. She's 32 years of age, Your Honor. She met her husband. He was the love of her life. They got married. Wonderful.
32 years old, you've got 3 kids and a husband, beautiful home, a great job, a husband that takes care of you and your children, and that also has a great job, and you snap. Obviously, you're having mental health issues. You're reaching out saying, I'm having crises, and you're not getting the help you need. That is a tragedy.
Wonderful young couple, and as counsel noted, she always wanted to have kids, always wanted to have babies. She's a nurse. She wanted to be a midwife because she wanted to help other women that would be in having babies, but didn't want to have all the medications. She was not a big medication person. Your Honor saw, I think there's probably close to 50 letters that have been submitted to you, and I know you read every one of them.
So she didn't want to be on all these medications, and she wasn't a big medication person. Sounds like she was reaching out for help, but she wasn't getting the help she needed, and she wasn't just trying to abuse a bunch of medications, but they were just shoving a bunch of medications at her, hoping that that would work, and it wasn't working. She probably needed some kind of aggressive counseling.
The incredible outpouring of support by other nurses that work at Mass General Hospital. The fact that these women have the vigil.
And you know how there's counseling for married couples, like marriage counseling? Well, there should be a counseling for families, like family counseling, which I'm sure there is. There's places, I know of places actually. There's a place in the town that I live by where they have it just looks like a house, but you go there and it's for families, and it's like $20 a visit, and you can go there to be able to visit your children, or for families, for a safe place for them to come together for birthday parties and stuff like that. If it's like family that doesn't get along and there's some kind of custody issues going on, then that's like a safe meeting place where they'll have somebody sitting there with you, which is really cool. But anyways,
That they write the letters to this court imploring you to understand that you sentence our bail issue, the woman before you, who was a beautiful person, who was thoroughly destroyed by these medications. That's for another day, obviously. A bail issue, bail argument. Your Honor is well aware under Conwell versus Vasquez at 481 Mass 750. Supreme Judicial Court indicated that this court, or the court, has vested in sound discretion of the bail judge. And the main considerations would be obviously the usual bail considerations: nature and circumstance of the offense, likelihood of success under the
do you guys think that she has a good defense?
offense, roots in the community.
Because he seems like he's doing the best that he can with what he has.
And of course, as the in Vasquez case, as well as Conwell versus Herring, 489 Mass 569, defendant's risk of flight. So now you have a situation, Your Honor, where this woman has incredible support, as you saw. Letters from Foxborough that was signed by about 15 women. Letters from her family, friends, letters from people she's known since the 6th grade that have stayed in touch with her. One thing that's a theme that is readily apparent is that Lindsay loved her children.
I feel like the judge is torn.
That she would always want to let us say.
And I'm sure Lindsay did love her children. And there's a lot of people that unfortunately take the lives of their children that didn't love them, that took their life because they were abusing their children, and maybe didn't even necessarily mean to, but because of the abuse, the child suffered fatally. And in this case, it seems different. Like she had a mental break, and that's what caused it. I don't feel like she didn't love her kids, and I don't feel like she wasn't a good mom. I feel like she was a good mom. It just seems that way to me. That's the vibe that I get.
So she would always rub her belly. She had pictures of her pregnant, standing next to Patrick, hanging on the wall. I was in the house. The house is absolutely loaded with indicia of love for those kids. Photographs on the wall, little drawings, all sorts of games, toys.
Though it's also possible that she just didn't have an attachment with her children, because that does happen. There are mothers out there that they seem to lead these awesome lives and have great jobs, but they just lack an attachment to their children. There's something that in nature that went wrong, and they're missing that chemical in their brain. And it's unfortunate, but it does happen.
Playpens, bassinets in the living room, in the dining room.
Just because they had everything they needed for their children doesn't mean that they had that attachment with them. And I should say she, because I feel like the dad did.
Loaded with toys. Virtually the entire house, including the master bedroom. Toys, things for the kids. This is not a situation, Your Honor, that was planned by any means. This is a situation that clearly was a product of mental illness. Now, under the best case, one of the issues, as I said, is whether or not there's a risk of flight. Now, I did submit to Your Honor a letter that was written by her physician, her attending surgeon, Nicole Raycott. This doctor was in surgery until 8:30 at night and actually took the time to write this letter for you to review. And I just want to make note that he makes reference to the fact that she is now in her 12th day of hospitalization following admission.
So she's in her 12th day of hospitalization when this came out already. So this has happened almost a month ago now. Like, not quite a month ago, but it was on the 25th, I believe. So
On January 25, after a 20-foot fall,
yeah, the 25th.
she suffered. Unlike when the government Friday was saying that she can move her legs and she's getting better, she's okay. No, she's not okay at all. He indicates that she suffered several severe spine fractures, including spinal cord transection. You know what that means? At the level of T5, T6. As you know, she had surgery for this from the orthopedic spine surgical service, who performed a decompression infusion. Unfortunately,
Now, I don't know what all that means, but it sounds terrible.
she is not expected to recover meaningful function at this point below that level of the spinal cord, which makes her a paraplegic, unable to move her legs or feel sensation.
No, it is kind of hard to feel bad for her because of what she did, but in a way, I kind of just do, because it's just the human and the mother in me. I just feel bad that she has to live with the fact that she just did this to herself and her children and her husband and their entire family and their entire community that's suffering in some way, shape, or form because of what she did. And she probably has to face the cold, hard truth of it now, when she was reaching out and crying and begging for help this whole time and nobody ever helped her. And then her final thing that she tried to do was end it, and she didn't even do that right. Like, I can't even imagine the pain that she must feel. And as a human, I wouldn't want anyone to feel that amount of pain. But because of what she did, it's hard in a way to feel bad for her.
From below her, he refers to umbilicus or belly button. He says she has no function below this level. Additionally, less conditions include rib fractures in the chest, both sides, cervical spine fractures, necessitate wearing of a collar around her neck due to the cervical spine fractures. She's paralyzed. The doctor indicates that she needs significant medical treatment. The doctor recommends that she would be discharged to Spalding Rehab. And you know that we have Spalding Rehab. You know that we have the Worcester Hospital.
What do you guys think? Does she need to go to prison, or should she go to spend her life in a hospital somewhere? Like, be a little more taken care of that way. I feel like she should be locked up in like a mental hospital for the rest of her life.
This court is vested under best case with your authority to have this woman not held on bail. Perhaps put a GPS on her, I guess, if someone's concerned that she's going to miraculously recover, which isn't going to happen. As your Honor knows, being a paraplegic, paralyzed, she can't move. She can't get off the bed. She can't walk. She can't go to the bathroom. She She has to have 24/7 medical care. Her emotional state is so bad that there is a significant fear of suicide. She has to have someone sit in the room 24/7.
Like I was saying before, she has someone sitting in her room 24/7 to make sure that she doesn't do anything to herself, because obviously she's probably going to try to unalive herself the first chance that she gets. Because, listen, if I was her, you know,
24/7 to watch her. They don't talk to her. They're not, chatting it up. They just sit there and watch out of that concern that she will commit suicide. So you have a paraplegic who can't walk, who is definitely a danger to herself, and the government wants to put her in where? Birmingham State Prison, Plymouth House of Correction. There's no way that any humane person.
I do feel like it's inhumane to put her in prison. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. I know I might get hate for it, but I feel like she should be in a mental hospital, where there's got to be a mental hospital place where they can care for her in a facility. There's got to be a facility out there for people in her condition, that where she can be locked up to where there's no way that she can get out. She's not going to get like special treatment or anything. It's just going to be so that her medical needs can be met and that her mental health needs can be met.
Would do that, especially within the structure of our criminal justice system, where a person is presumed innocent. And I'm not suggesting the facts that the government has read, but she has a good defense. She has a darn good defense in this case, because that's what happened. And I just want to share with you, Your Honor, one of the things that's interesting. When I was in the house, I came across a drawer that had a bunch of pill bottles in it, and I called the DA and I said, I got these pill bottles, and made arrangements. I'm going to be giving them to them. And it's all the Prozac and the Trazodone and all that stuff.
That's so many pills to be on. It reminds me of Marilyn Monroe.
But inside the drawer was this little vase. And I didn't know what it was. It just looked like a little vase to me. And my wife said to me, oh, that looks like a wish vase. I said, what's a wish vase? She said, when people write down little wishes and they put little pieces of paper and they put them inside the vase. And there are literally dozens of these little pieces of paper that talk about Lindsay's wish for happiness and health for her children.
That is cool. I want to make one of those now. I didn't even know those existed or what those even were until just now.
That she could get pregnant again. That she would be able to be with her children, little Calvin, Dawson, Cora. That they would be happy, healthy, and successful. This is not a woman, Your Honor, that had any reason to harm those.
It is mind-boggling, you guys, to think about. This isn't a woman that had any reason to harm her children. Well, nobody ever has a reason to harm their children, but it's mind-boggling to think that she was a nurse, a labor and delivery nurse that seemed to have such a great life, and she did this to her children.
Those innocent children. My request, Your Honor, is that the court would put her on a GPS if you feel that's required, and let the doctors continue to treat her. Let her go to Spalding Rehab. She will sign a waiver that allows probation at any time to speak with her treating physicians or
The prosecution's like, hell no.
social worker. Find out how she's doing. Does it look as though she's getting close to regaining the ability to walk, which she isn't, but nevertheless, they would be able to do that. And then the government would be notified, and they can come back in here again and try to hold her without bail. My request would then be to whisper for the emotional thing.
Now, am I crazy or is that sounding fair? Because if she comes out and says, yeah, I wanted them to die, I planned on it, I planned on them dying because I just wanted to hurt them, well then yeah, lock her up, put her in prison. But if she really was experiencing psychosis, I think she needs to be in a mental hospital.
And the mental illness aspect. I don't think that is fair or just or consistent with our duties to each other as human beings to put her in jail. I'm asking that she be allowed to continue with her medical treatment.
Asking that she can continue with her medical treatment, Your Honor.
Commonwealth.
We've been looking to medical medical treatment if she's held. We were under the impression we'd received information before that she couldn't relate, but then we learned updated medical information that she, for the time being, is paralyzed from the waist down. If she is held, she can go to the Shattuck Hospital. If Shattuck does not have what she needs, she can be sent to another facility, and the corrections officers would go with her there. Shattuck would actually work with her, the doctors at the hospital she's currently at, to determine the best course of treatment. And if whatever she needs, she's going to get. But as defense counsel said, she is a danger to herself and from the Commonwealth's perspective, others. And just because she is paralyzed, is
So they're saying basically their whole thing is that they think she's a danger to others.
not mean she's not a flight risk. She will be in a wheelchair eventually, and she can be driven somewhere. She can be flown somewhere. It does not mean that she will never be able to leave this area.
Just would like to say that I have been, unfortunately, in the Shattuck Hospital. To suggest that she can get what she needs from the Shattuck Hospital is absolutely not true. The care that she's receiving at the hospital she's at now, and the care that she would be receiving at the Spalding Rehab, are light years ahead of the dismal, dank conditions of the Shattuck Hospital that we put our prisoners in. It's like something out of Iran, and that's
So I take it that's the prison hospital.
up there. Okay.
Thank you both. Both of you, all of you who were here before me, that will be litigating this case are all very well respected. And I'm sure at some point in time in Superior Court, this case will be tried in very professional and very well by both sides. As counsel stated in Commonwealth v. Vasquez, the Supreme Judicial Court addressed the issue of bail in first-degree murder cases, and Justice Lowy issued a detailed decision about the issues in these types of cases. The court found that a defendant charged with first-degree murder has no right to bail, but may be admitted to bail in the discretion of the judge. The court ruled that a judge should consider the nature and circumstances of the offense and weigh the defendant's risk of flight in light of the strength or weaknesses of the Commonwealth's case and the potential penalty.
So again, this is Lindsay Clancy, arraignment, prosecution, defense makes cases and killing of 3 Duxbury children from CBS Boston, February 7th, 2023. Lindsay Clancy being arraigned from her hospital bed.
Of a sentence to life in prison. The court further noted that appropriate considerations for a judge would include the defendant's family ties, financial resources, length of residence in the community, character, mental condition, record of conviction, the appearances at court proceedings, or any previous flight to avoid prosecution or
I don't think she would be a flight risk at all. I think that would be ridiculous to think that she would be a flight risk.
failure to appear at any court proceeding. It is important to note that the purpose of bail is not to impose punishment. The court has conducted a careful review of the details of the case and the defendant's history. The court has reviewed the filings that have been made, as well as letters submitted by counsel for the defendant and the update that was received from her attending trauma surgeon.
So I wonder what the attending trauma surgeon was thinking, and I wonder how the nurses that are treating her are thinking.
The factual allegations in this case are both horrific and tragic. The potential penalty faced by the defendant if convicted is severe. The defendant has no criminal history. She does not even have a driving record.
She has no criminal history, not even a driving record. That's pretty amazing, to say the least, because most people at least have a driving record.
There is no evidence of any history of any abusive behavior by the defendant. The defendant was raised in New England and has extensive ties to the local
Can you imagine being the labor and delivery nurses that used to work with her and what they think right now?
area. She has an extremely supportive family. She worked for several years in the local hospital, and a number of co-workers have written letters in support of the defendant and her character. She is described in these letters as an exemplary worker, colleague, and friend. In the letter submitted by her attending trauma surgeon, she has extensive injuries that will require long-term
So yeah, how could she possibly be a flight risk? I mean, get real. Come on.
inpatient rehabilitation. Weighing
I'm not like in defense of this woman. I'm really not, but I just feel like I'm more on the defense's side a little bit. I hate me for it. I don't know.
what the doctor has written and the facts of the defendant's current condition, the court finds that there is minimal risk of flight given the defendant's circumstances. The court is going to make the following order on F. The defendant shall remain in her current hospital until medically cleared to be moved to a new facility. As a condition of bail, the defendant is ordered not to leave the hospital until discharged to a new facility. The defendant shall provide notice to probation 48 hours in advance of any transfer to a different facility. Based on the letter of the doctor, it would appear likely that she would be sent from the hospital
I wonder if she even cares what happens to her.
setting to a 24/7 rehabilitation facility, like the Spalding Rehab. As a condition of bail, if sent to a 24/7 rehabilitation facility, she is ordered to remain in that facility, with the exception of if she needed to be transported to a different medical facility or hospital for an additional MRI or something like that. The defendant shall continue to receive mental health treatment while hospitalized and sign releases for probation to monitor compliance with counseling. In the event that the defendant were to complete the services at a 24/7 rehab and complete that care, the court would hold a further hearing as to whether or not the defendant were in need of further mental health treatment that
That's cool that they would hold another hearing to see if she was in further need.
would need to be done in an inpatient setting.
But yeah, obviously it would have to be in an inpatient setting.
Whether or not the defendant's mental health care could be provided in a residential setting. The court would direct court clinician or doctor to consult with the defendant's mental health providers to conduct this evaluation at the appropriate time in the future. If the defendant were in a position that she was going to be discharged to a residential setting, both sides would have the opportunity to be heard further. Any discharge in a residential setting, the defendant would be subject to home confinement with a court.
I just feel like she doesn't really care. Like, she's probably sitting here, like, not even listening to all the things that the judge is saying right now because she probably literally doesn't even care.
With electronic monitoring to monitor home detention. There would be exclusions that would be available if the defendant needed to attend medical or rehabilitation appointments, counseling sessions, or religious worship sessions. The court would have probation visit any proposed residential setting prior to the defendant being discharged to that type of a setting to ensure that such setting was appropriate and safe. The defendant is ordered to surrender her passport to probation. In the event that the defendant does not have a passport, she is prohibited from applying for a passport. The court is not going to set any monetary bail at this time.
Wow. So what do you guys think of that? Do you think that you are on more the defense's side, or do you think you are on the prosecution's side more? Because I feel like I was almost a little bit more on the defense's side just because they did have a lot of good points. And I'm not saying I'm taking up for this woman because what she did was completely awful. And there's nothing you can do to take something like that back or to okay something like that, to justify something like that. It's just awful no matter how you look at it. But at the same time, I don't think that she needs to be in prison. That's just my opinion. I think she needs to be in a mental health facility. But she did tie exercise ropes around her 3 children's necks for several minutes and then cut herself and jump out of a window while her husband was running some errands. She did see how long he was going to be out of town, or, like out of town or whatever, how long he wasn't going to be home. So it does seem like she planned the unalivings and gave herself the time and privacy she needed to commit this. If you or someone you know needs help, please contact the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by calling 988, the National Prevention Hotline, at 1-800-273-8255, or reach out to the Crisis Text Line by texting HOME to 741-741 anytime. Clancy pleaded not guilty, and her lawyer, noting that the suicide attempt left her unable to walk, said what happened clearly was a product of mental illness and asked that she be kept in a medical facility while she recovers. The judge ordered Clancy held in her current hospital until doctors clear her to go to a new facility for rehab, and once she's allowed to go to the new facility, that she remain there except for medical care. She wasn't held on any cash bail, and she's due back in court May 2nd. So on May 2nd, we'll have to see what happens. Again, don't ever be ashamed if you're having a mental health crisis. I'm somebody that you can always reach out to. You can always email me if you need to talk. And I truly mean that, because I'm by no means a life coach or anything like that, but I do have experience with mental health crisis, and I'm willing to always